Several days ago, I did a video on the original breakfast shed and showing that there was an alternate breakfast shed not very far away. Many persons clicked and viewed that video. If you haven't seen the video, I have placed a link in the video description. For those who did watch that video, thank you very much for viewing it. But today I've come back to do another video about the original breakfast shed. But this video is about issues that are affecting the breakfast shed and will continue to affect the breakfast shed. Now let me say at the outset that I have no inside knowledge about the financial affairs at the breakfast shed or about the reported rent dispute and non-payment of electricity. I have no inside knowledge of that. Instead, this video is from my perspective of attending or going to the breakfast shed over many years and what I have observed, coupled with my experience of managing businesses for over 40 years. And as I said a short while ago, the issues that I'm going to highlight are issues that have slowly over time built and affected the original breakfast shed. And if it is reopened, will continue to affect the original breakfast shed. So let me head straight into the very first issue that has an overall effect on the operation of the breakfast shed. What we have here is the parking area for the original breakfast shed, the parking lot. I'm recording this video on a Sunday morning and the breakfast shed is closed. So the parking area is empty. But you can see it's a small parking area. And one of the problems that's affecting the original breakfast shed is that most times when it was in operation, when you came, the parking lot was filled. So it was a disincentive for anybody driving into Port of Spain who decided, I'm going to stop at the original breakfast shed and have a meal. They couldn't find anywhere to park. But what I've noticed over the years is that the parking area was not filled with people who had come in, stopped for 40 minutes to get a meal and then leave. Invariably, you'd see cars parked here from in the morning all day. So that although the sign here says customer parking only, that is not what was happening. There were other people parking here. Whether those persons were individuals who worked at the next door water taxi terminal or people, vendors from within the original breakfast shed, the parking spaces were occupied. And that's a serious disincentive for anybody driving into Port of Spain with the desire to come and eat at the breakfast shed. They couldn't find anywhere to park. And as a result, didn't stop and eat here. Now, some, when coming, would park along the shoulder of the road. But several months ago, the ministry announced that anybody parking on the shoulder of the road would be ticketed and possibly have their car towed. so that those who parked on the shoulder and came in to get something to eat were no longer able to do so, further restricting the number of people who could drive here to get a meal. As a result, you began to see less and less people coming here to get a meal. Now, you would think that because the original breakfast shed is just across from the business district of Port of Spain, you would have a lot of people who would walk along and come here to get a meal. That, however, wasn't happening. Why? Well, you have to cross 6 lanes of vehicular traffic. And although the government constructed a walkover, one of the things I have observed about Trinidadians is we don't use the walkovers that are provided. I think part of the reason is the uphill walk to get to the walkover. Trinidadians don't like to walk uphill, particularly those who lead a very sedentary lifestyle, because the minute you start to walk uphill, there's more exertion required of the body. Trinidadians don't like the uphill walk, so they don't use it. So although the original breakfast shed was across from the business district, we were seeing less and less persons coming here to eat. The foot traffic, in other words, had fallen tremendously. Now, the breakfast shed is adjacent to 2 large towers filled with government employees. So you would think that although the breakfast shed is somewhat cut off from the business district, you have these 2 large towers of government employees, a ready-made customer base for the original breakfast shed. But yet, the customer traffic at the original breakfast shed has reduced. Why? Well, as government employees will tell you, they have been on 2014 salaries for more than 10 years, while inflation has been growing. And so one of the things I have noticed, particularly in the afternoons when these offices empty, is that you see the workers all going home with a lunch pail, a lunch kit, which says to me that in an attempt to save money, these employees have been packing their own lunch and bringing that to work. And so not patronizing the original breakfast shed as they attempt to balance their income with the rising expenditure in their life. Just across the road, we're looking at what's called the government campus, another group of government employees. And they too would be affected by the rising cost of living. But you'll think that even with that, out of some of them, they would patronize the original breakfast shed. However, just along this campus is Richmond Street and then Edward Street. And those places became, well, I wouldn't say filled, but on those streets we began to see food places opening up, serving the same type of Creole food that is served at the original breakfast shed. As a result, many of those government employees who chose to go out and buy Creole food for lunch would find it easier to simply come out of the campus and walk along Richmond Street and get the same type of food and not have to cross a 6-lane highway, reducing, therefore, the potential customer base of the original breakfast shed. Now let us look at something else that has been happening here with the original breakfast shed. When I first started visiting the original breakfast shed, and I'm talking about back in the days when it was the galvanized shed that was in the area that is now occupied by the Hyatt Hotel, there were multiple vendors. Slowly over time, what we've seen is a reduction in the number of vendors here at the original breakfast shed. Now, it's possible that that has happened because of the fall in the foot traffic. Less and less people coming in to purchase food, therefore harder for each individual vendor to make a profit and earn a living. Now, it's my understanding that the original breakfast shed was set up to run as a cooperative, with each person paying what would essentially be a share of the rent. Well, if there are less and less vendors, then there's less people contributing to paying the rent. What I also noticed is that the few surviving vendors is expanded the spaces that they're occupying. Now, whether the amount of rent that they were or are paying expanded along with the greater space, or whether they continued to pay, well, let's put it, rent for one space, but occupy 2 and 3. If that was the case, then clearly you're not going to collect rent, or not going to collect sufficient rent to cover the charges from UDCOT. This was one space that, to me, I haven't seen a vendor selling from here in an extremely long time. This one, I believe she was still operating until they closed down. This space, yes, you're seeing pots, but I can tell you, nobody was selling from here. They were using this as a storage space. Storage of pots and pans and food items, but not actually selling. So the reduction in the number of vendors would definitely have impacted upon their ability to cover whatever were the rental charges, whether subsidized or not. Now, what do we do when faced with this type of situation? I would hope that attempts are made to have the breakfast shed continue in operation. It's said that we want to increase tourism in this economy, that we want to increase the money that we earn from tourism. And to me, the original breakfast shed should be viewed as part of our tourism product. Just behind me is the Hyatt Hotel. We have tourists that come and stay there. Across the street from the Hyatt is the Radisson. It would be nice that a visitor to Trinidad can walk out of their hotel and within a few minutes get to a place that is serving purely local food. But given the issues that I have raised, how can the original breakfast shed continue? In my view, it may be time for a strategic shift. It may be time to reimagine what the original breakfast shed will be. As it stands now, the original breakfast shed is known largely for Creole food. Maybe it should be reimagined as a place for totally local food, not just Creole food, but totally local food. In other words, to add variety, to widen the base of food items that are sold there. So I'm not suggesting that you turn it into one of these food hubs that is serving spaghetti and meatballs and pasta Alfredo. Definitely not. The accent must be on local. But widen the spread, increase the variety of local foods that are sold there. That may in fact attract more locals to come and eat there, to park elsewhere and walk across the walkway to come. It would make it much more attractive to a visitor to come there and eat, not just once while they're in Trinidad, but hopefully multiple times while they are here in Trinidad. I know Hyatt and Radisson will say that they're serving local food, that a visitor can get local food at the hotel. It's in their interest to say that, because quite honestly, they would want the visitor to spend all their money with them and not spend it elsewhere. But yes, it's local food there, but I can tell you, it doesn't have quite the same taste. It's not the same home style of cooking. Can making a strategic shift work for a business, especially a food business? Most definitely. I don't know how many of you remember Mr. Chow that was on Tragri Road. Mr. Chow served what they said was some slow cooked meats cooked over a wood fire. I ate there twice. I wasn't impressed. Didn't particularly like the taste of the meat, sir. But then the people who owned Mr. Chow made a strategic shift. They closed down Mr. Chow and reopened it as a food hub with a variety of vendors. Now, especially on a weekend and in the evenings, you cannot get a place to park near there. And inside is filled. They made a strategic shift, converted it into a food hub, had multiple vendors, and now there are much more people going there than ever went to Mr. Chow. So it may be time to look for a strategic, or to make rather, a strategic shift with the original breakfast shed. I'm not suggesting to dispense with the Creole food, to get rid of it. No. But it may be necessary to increase the base of vendors and broaden the variety of food that is provided there. Keep it local. Keep it Trinidad and Tobago food. But widen the number of vendors and the range of food that is there. The parking, well, folks, you can't expand that parking lot. They're hemmed in. Can't really do anything. So now you have to give people a reason to want to come there, because they're going to get an experience there that is different to what they can get if they just stopped off in some place on Richmond Street or Edward Street. You have to make it that people are willing to pay to park and use the walkway. Because just across, and let me show you, just across, there is the Furnace car park, the multi-story car park. It's not that far from the original breakfast shed. And I don't think you can see it here, but behind, or just behind the Hyatt, is another multi-story car park. So that there is parking in close proximity. It's paid parking. So people can park nearby and walk and come to the original breakfast shed. But you have to give them a compelling reason to want to pay to park and come to purchase food here. I hope that my take on the issues affecting the breakfast shed have, shall I say, enlightened you. And although I've spoken exclusively about the original breakfast shed, in truth and in fact, these are issues that can affect any business. And it's the sort of things that every business has to look at. What to do when your customer base starts dying off. Dying off because they're too old. Dying off because it's become difficult to get to your place. Dying off because, well, they're tired of what they get there. You know the old saying, been there, done that. You have to look at those sort of issues and determine, well, what do I do to keep this business going? I had a friend, well, two friends actually, but one died, who ran a bar in St. James for many, many years. Very popular bar. And then they moved to Arapita Avenue. And I went a few times, didn't see the one that was left alive, until one day I was there and I saw him. And I said to him, boy, I have not been seeing you here whenever I come. He said, no, he's still involved, but now he has his son involved in the business. And I said, oh, the son, that's good. You're preparing him to take over. And he said to me, he said, yes, that's one reason. But the other is to keep the business going even now. And I said, why? He said, look at you, you've gotten older. You used to be here almost every Friday or Saturday. Now you come once in a while because you're much older. So we are not unique in that respect. A lot of the guys used to be here when you were coming regularly. I've also gotten older. So I got my son involved to pull in a younger crowd and so keep the business going. So he made, in a sense, a type of strategic shift in that he pulled back, still stayed involved, but pulled back from being the front or face and had his son as the face of the business to pull in, as he said, that younger crowd, because they're the ones that line regularly and spend the money. All businesses at times have to look at and consider whether it's time for them to make a strategic shift in their operations. Well, folks, that's it. Bye for now. As I said, I don't know what's going to happen here. We all wait to see what will happen with this original breakfast shed.